You ever wonder what happens when a society just stops listening to warnings for years, decades, even centuries? Well, we're about to dive into a stark, 2,600-year-old prophecy of societal collapse from the book of Jeremiah. It's a pretty intense look at what happens when a nation is finally forced to face the consequences of its own choices. So, right out of the gate, we're hit with this. This isn't a warning anymore, you know? This is a verdict. The language is just so final. I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. That sense of unavoidable, locked-in judgment, it hangs over everything else we're about to unpack. There's no way out. Now, it's really important we get this next part right. That word evil can throw you off. In the original Hebrew, the word is ra'ah, and it doesn't mean God is suddenly becoming morally wicked. Not at all. It means calamity, disaster, distress. Think of it like this. It's the consequence that was written into the fine print of their national contract, their covenant from the very beginning. It's the disaster they were promised if they broke the terms. And this timeline, wow, it just puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? The covenant, with all its blessings and curses, was set up way back around 1400 BC. Then you fast forward centuries, and bam, the consequences finally arrive with the Babylonian invasions, ending with the total destruction of Jerusalem. So this wasn't some sudden, angry punishment. This was a bill that had been collecting interest for almost 1,000 years. Okay, so what exactly did they do to get such a severe judgment? Well, let's think of this next part as the prosecution laying out its case in a divine lawsuit. And the main charge on the table? The crime of idolatry. The irony here is just staggering. When that disaster finally hits, when the walls are coming down, the people will cry out for help. But here's the twist. They won't cry out to the God of their covenant. No. They'll turn to the very same gods whose worship caused this whole crisis. And as the text makes painfully clear, those gods are going to be totally, utterly powerless to save them. And this slide just lays the scale of the betrayal bare. The original deal was simple, one God. But what was the reality on the ground? A society just saturated with other gods. Jeremiah puts it so bluntly, it's almost a punchline. According to the number of thy cities were thy gods, O Judah. It was a complete spiritual reversal, a total 180 from where they started. And we're not talking about some fringe movement either. This wasn't something happening in the shadows. The text describes altars to the god Baal, which Jeremiah just calls the shameful thing, on basically every street corner in the capital. These weren't just decorative statues. They represented political alliances, desperate prayers for rain, the whole shebang. Idolatry had become woven into the very fabric of daily life. So, we've seen the crime, but you have to understand this was never just about breaking a rule on a stone tablet. It was about shattering a relationship. So let's look at the fallout, the personal consequences, in part 2, a covenant betrayed. And here we get a command that is just absolutely shocking. God speaks directly to his own prophet Jeremiah and tells him, do not pray for this people. Just let that sink in. The person whose job it is to stand in the gap and plead their case is told to stand down. The time for warnings, for appeals, for intercession, it's over. The judgment is locked. Yeah, that command is basically a formal declaration from the court. The covenant lawsuit has moved past the trial phase and right into sentencing. All the lines of communication for an appeal, they're officially closed. The silence from the heavens is deafening. And you see just how personal this was. Look at the language God uses. He calls the nation my beloved. That's a term of deep intimacy and affection. But in return, they have wrought lewdness with many, which is the language of marital adultery. Because of that, all their religious rituals have become meaningless, just empty gestures. And maybe the worst part, they actually rejoice in what they're doing. The relationship isn't just damaged, it's completely in ruins. Okay, so this brings us to our final section, and it all culminates in one of the most powerful and unforgettable metaphors in the entire prophecy. Let's look at part 3, the burning olive tree. First, we get the before picture. For the nation of Israel, the olive tree was this incredibly potent symbol. It meant blessing, it meant being rooted deep in the land, it meant being productive and fruitful. You know, an olive tree is a long-term investment that provides for generations, and that is exactly how God saw his people, beautiful, healthy, and full of good fruit. And then the image takes this incredibly violent turn. With the noise of a great tumult, he hath kindled fire upon it.
That beautiful, thriving tree is suddenly set ablaze, its branches snapping and breaking. It's such a visceral image for the chaos of invasion, the horror of exile, and a deep, profound loss that would be felt for generations.
But then you have to ask, okay, who's responsible here? And this is where it gets really fascinating. The text says the Lord, the one who planted the tree in the first place, is the one who pronounces judgment on it. But it also says this is something the people have done against themselves. So the judgment comes from God, for sure, but the cause of that judgment comes directly from their own actions.
And it's important to remember this wasn't just a problem with Judah, the southern kingdom. The text makes a point to include the house of Israel, which was the northern kingdom that had already been wiped out by Assyria more than a century earlier. This shows that the prophecy is looking at the big picture, a long-term, comprehensive, total failure by the entire nation to hold up their end of the bargain.
So in the end, the text is crystal clear that the nation did this against themselves. And that really leaves us with this huge, timeless question, one that applies just as much today as it did back then. At what point do a society's collective choices stop being just choices and become its own inescapable judgment?